let's jump right into episode 6 in the Scarlands. Last we left off, the colonists were busy working on recruiting a couple new folks that they met in one of the nearby ancient dangers. On top of that, they have had their hands full fending off the recent wave of mechs that have been doing their absolute best to clear out the area of human life. Even still, the colonists have been able to fend off each attack and managed to eke out a pretty comfortable living. Now it's just a matter of finishing off this last poison ship and then finishing the final preparation for the arrival of the colonists sent by those financiers. The wardens have been making significant progress recruiting those 2 ancient soldiers that were recovered from one of the nearby ancient dangers. Nicole is almost fully recruited, and Hammer, well, he just now has had his conviction broken, bringing him around to the colony's ideology. Now it's just a matter of time before they're both full colonists. Ivan hasn't been around for very long, but even still, he's been having trouble making friends with the other colonists. Man has been treating him rather kindly, but she doesn't quite yet have a high opinion of the kid. Hopefully, in time, he can make a few new friends around this place. Or at least someone to keep an eye out for him. It does look like Watson and Mio both like him at least a fair bit. Maybe in the end they'll help keep him safe. Meanwhile, Voss has been up late at night working again. We may as well officially switch him over to a nighttime schedule. He does all his work at night anyway, so this will just assure that he has a full sleep bar while he's busy working around the colony. Maybe a couple of other colonists who don't hate him can also be moved to a similar schedule in the near future. It looks like one of those ancient soldiers has decided to join as a full colonist. Nicole should end up being a pretty nice addition to the colony. It's not entirely clear what her role is going to be, but at this point, they can use all the extra hands they can get. Well, anyway, welcome to the colony, Nicole. These new recruits are going to need bedrooms, and these rooms up in the northeast corner are all but finished. Let's get the furniture moved in and make sure the doors are built. Then, they'll be ready to be used. There we go. They're basically finished at this point. Good enough for Nicole to move in at least. By the time the other detainee has been recruited, then the other room should be ready. One of the next projects that needs to be finished after the new bedrooms is the hospital upgrade. They've been using basic steel beds for most of the medical care so far, and it's about time to get those fancy new hospital beds installed. Let's go with 6 total hospital beds for this number of colonists. That should work well enough. In the meantime, they can tear out these old beds. Really don't need those anymore. A Mechanoid cluster has landed over in the east. It's a psychic drone protected by a small number of basic mechanoids. Except that centipede, that one is not so basic. Man gave the order to man the mortars, and they began to hurriedly load the high explosive shells. The first strike was a direct hit, damaging the cluster and activating the mechs into attack mode. The colonists prepared themselves as the mechanoids began toward the colony. They met the mechanoids at the eastern gate, hoping for a direct confrontation and a quick end to the cluster. Mio took the lead and distracted the mechs as they entered through the gate. The rest of the defense force waited close behind. They opened fire as soon as the first mechs passed through the doors. The colonists made short work of the first few mechs that made their way in. The remaining mechs followed through and each one met the same end. Quick and simple. Now it's just a matter of going out to finish off the cluster. Man ordered Jet to accompany her, and the two approached the cluster armed with grenades and a smoke launcher. They took advantage of the turret's inability to detect motion through the smoke. Jet blindly lobbed the grenades, hoping the explosions would eventually damage the remaining structures enough to shut them down. It took a while, but it did end up working out. The cluster was finished and the two returned to the colony safe and sound. The colony's been growing, but unfortunately, food production has not kept up. Even after processing all of the food through the nutrient-based machine, they've still found themselves facing a food shortage. Their only choice now is to build another set of hydroponic tables just to try to boost their total rice production as best they can. From the east, an enormous group of panthers have made their way to the colony. They're all Scaria-ridden and intent on tearing apart anything that they come across. The colonists better hide out inside until this whole thing blows over. Hammer has chosen a terrible time to binge on food. Not only are they low, but hopefully he's satisfied with nutrient paste and doesn't decide to go for a walk outside looking for different meals. A bulk goods trader ship recently entered into orbit and has made contact with the colony through the comms console. They've brought a significant amount of steel that the colonists would love to get their hands on. Now it's just a matter of figuring out what they need to trade away in order to get as much as they possibly can. They can offer these animal pulsers, given the fact that there's rarely enough wild animals around here to make them worthwhile. Much better off putting that into steel instead. May as well offer all the luciferium and leather as well. There we go. That should make both sides happy. 500 steel should go a long way in the colony. It's taken a while, but the shuttle is finally under construction. This will give them the ability to begin to trade with nearby settlements, which should end up being rather helpful toward the growth of this place. All set. Hopefully this fancy new shuttle ends up being useful to these folks. Poor Ivan. He's been having such a difficult time since joining up with the colony. Now, he's found himself in a fistfight with Jet. Unfortunately for him, she has significantly more experience in hand-to-hand combat than he does, and it really showed here. By the end, he found himself bloodied on the ground, while Jet walked away with only a few bruises. It turns out that Ivan was responsible for this one. He insulted Jet's nephew's eating habits. It's not entirely clear who Jet's nephew is, but it was enough to drive Jet into a rage to defend him. Seems a bit extreme to turn to violence over a slight about eating habits, but these colonists oftentimes behave in strange and unexpected ways. Oddly enough, it turns out that in the end, the fight wasn't massively damaging to their relationship. They're still fairly neutral with one another. Maybe they can still salvage things and end up as friends. Well, tribal raiders have arrived for another attempt to sack and loot the settlement. The colonists managed to spot the group approaching from the south, but it wasn't until they were at the walls that they realized there were multiple groups attacking from several different directions. They mustered to the southern wall and prepared for the assault. Voss opened the doors, and Mio stepped forward, preparing for the inevitable. To the benefit of the colonists, the tribals lacked any significant organization, and instead broke into small groups that lacked any real cohesion with the larger group. At first, they tried their hand at scaling the walls, but after noticing an open door, the tribals abandoned that plan and took toward the opening. They trickled through in small groups, and each tribal was torn down as they entered. It did not take long before the first group was shaken and routed. The second group began to enter through the same door, only to see the broken bodies of their fellow tribesmen. After the first few began to rout, a chain reaction began, causing the entire remaining force to turn back, running toward home as fast as their legs would take them. Turns out Joey has taken the chaos as an opportunity to try to escape. If only his timing was better. Mia was passing by and heard all the commotion. Unfortunately for Joey, she still had her spear from the previous raid. With her first attack, somehow she completely severed his left leg. Jeez, poor Joey. Cut down while he just tries to regain his freedom. Well, in other parts of the colony, the colonists have begun construction on a new battery room. They've been having issues sustaining their power supply when the sun goes down. Hopefully a few more batteries will work towards solving that problem. Otherwise, they're going to remain reliant on the chemical generators to keep things running when the solar cuts out. And with the state of the boomalopes, that might not work out too well. And now it's finally time to assign the colony's first shooting specialist. Man has selected Ivan for this role, given his expertise with firearms, and frankly, limited talent in any other field. He is a bit young, but he'll grow into the role over time. Hopefully the extra responsibility will help him mature and grow. And maybe this will earn him a bit more respect in the colony, especially with Jet. It likely comes as no surprise that Joey is having an incredibly difficult time. First, he was taken against his will and thrown in a small room. Then, when he was trying to regain his freedom, his leg was completely destroyed. Now he's been trying to recover from the massive trauma, and it's causing him intense anguish. The colonists have taken pity on him and decided to try to bring him into the fold. Unfortunately, the gap that they're going to have to bridge is staggering. He, for good reason, hates each and every one of them. The first step they're going to have to take is to replace that leg that he lost, that they destroyed. Certainly a prosthetic is an inadequate replacement to his natural leg, but it's all the colonists can do for now. Now the poison from the Mechanoid ship has started to take its toll on the colony. It's unlikely that the rot will spread any further into the colony, but even just touching the edges of the growing zone is enough to cause a headache. Man has given the order to load the mortars and open fire. The Scythers are programmed to protect the ship at all costs, and will only attack if the ship is destroyed, so the colonists have an opportunity to deal massive damage without any real risk. It's only going to cost them a small amount of chem fuel and a little bit of steel. Really a fair trade in the end. Well, Joey's prosthetic has been finished, and Wilson has taken upon it himself to handle the surgery. Truthfully, Wilson is not well suited for surgery, given that his pig hands have trouble manipulating the surgical instruments. But what he lacks in dexterity, he more than makes up for in medical knowledge. Even with his shortcomings, he managed to successfully get Joey's prosthetic in place. Hopefully this helps him feel a little less traumatized. A little bit less. The colonists took a short break from the mortar strike and are already back at it again. As long as they have a supply of shells, they can keep up the barrage. The Scythers are falling one by one, and the ones that still stand are taking massive damage. This should make it quite a bit easier when the time comes to confront them directly. It looks like in the process of dealing with one of the previous raid cleanups, Panda has spent a bit too much time around the rotting corpses. The noxious gases have taken their toll on her lungs and rot has set in. If the lung rot isn't dealt with directly, it could eventually lead to her death. Better to treat it with medicine now before running into problems later. After deciding what to do with Joey, the colonists set to work befriending him and spent time slowly guiding him to the colony's ideology. It took a while, but he has become convinced that the colony is in fact correct in their way of thinking, even after that whole messy lake business. Now it's just a matter of finishing the recruitment process. He's not necessarily an incredibly useful addition to the colony, but after seeing what he's gone through, the colonists just felt pity for him and decided to try to help improve his life. Better that he stays here than let him wander the wastes with only one leg. The constant expansion of the colony has begun to consume the majority of the space within the outer walls. As the living area expands outward, the farming zones seem to be getting smaller and smaller. It's really affecting the hay production more than anything, and the animals are beginning to run out of food. There's quite a bit of space for new hay growth to the south, but it will require expanding the walls so the raiders don't get any ideas about burning down the fields. The colonists can take advantage of these ruins to the west to serve as part of the wall to help speed along construction. Once this wall gets finished and the fields planted, hopefully then the animals will have enough food for the near future. Starving boomlopes are a massive problem, truthfully. Not only will that mean the end of the chem fuel production, but it's also going to be rather explosive. Not only are the animals suffering, but there's still not enough food to feed all the new mouths that are showing up in the settlement. The only real option is to build even more hydroponic tables. Once all these plant tables are finished, then the food production should satisfy demand. The colonists have been busy at work on their various projects, but there's always something to derail the progress. This time a flu has begun to spread throughout the colony. 6 of the colonists have become ill and are going to need treatment. For now, herbal medicine should be enough, but if anyone falls behind on building immunity, they can switch over to industrial medicine. The very next day, while still recovering from the flu outbreak, an unusual rumbling was felt by several of the colonists in the hospital. There's always a constant vibration felt from the nearby deep drill, but this was substantial and alarming. The colonists remained unsure of the source of the rumbling until cracks began to appear around the deep drill. They gathered around the cracks to assess the damage and try to decide upon a course of action. While they deliberated, massive insects began to pour out from the cracks. Without a second of hesitation, the hounds leapt at the bugs. Then the first gunshot rang, followed by the explosion of all of their weapons firing in unison. The battle was chaotic and bloody, but only lasted a few seconds. After the smoke cleared, the hall was covered in dirt and ichor. The bugs were dead, and the colonists suffered no casualties, but they came away from the battle wary of what remained hidden below. During the battle with the insects, Hammer found himself wandering off aimlessly, refusing to listen to commands. By the time the battle had ended, Hammer had wandered into even bigger problems. He wandered northward, only to be met by several of those scythers that were still aggressively defending their ship. He suffered several stabs to the chest and collapsed. Someone's going to have to go out and save him, or he'll surely bleed to death. Luckily for him, Jet has mustered the courage to venture out unguarded and drag his unconscious body back behind the safety of the walls. She managed to get him into the hospital with little time to spare. Watson immediately jumped to work to stem the bleeding. Hopefully in the future, Hammer will be a little bit more careful when deciding where to wander off to. Another group of infected panthers have appeared near the colony. It's not entirely clear why such a large pack of infected panthers are roaming about. Usually they're more solitary creatures, but for some reason they've banded together. Is it caused by the Scaria, or did the Scaria spread because of the large numbers? It's difficult to say, but what is certain is they're here and ready to tear down anything in their way. Luckily, the most recent wall expansion has been finished. Mostly. It's at least ready to protect the new hayfields from these monsters. When it rains, it pours. In this case, it pours toxic rain. The colony was already struggling with its food supply for both colonists and animals. This toxic fallout is going to make things quite a bit more difficult. The colonists can all hide out from the rain, but the plants are all going to die. At least the colonists can try to harvest anything they can for now. But it is going to stall growing over the near term. This is a good opportunity to use whatever resources they have sitting around to build more of these hydroponic tables. They have been busy drilling for more steel. That, combined with the ability to produce components, means they can realistically construct as many hydroponic tables as they need to satisfy food demand. Speaking of mining for more steel, another insect infestation has clawed its way toward the surface. Now that the colonists have previously experienced the bugs digging to the surface, they know what to expect. The defense force gathered near the cracks before the bugs appeared and prepared to fire. As soon as the insects broke the surface, they opened fire. The colonists made short work of the insects and began cleaning up the mess and processing the corpses. No reason to let good meat go to waste. At the very least, they can use the insect meat to make chem fuel. Now a bulk goods trader has arrived looking to trade their wares. Unfortunately, they chose a very dangerous path into the colony, and they converged right into the path of the Scythers. The Scythers have reactivated with the sole intent of cutting down anything that threatens their ship. The traders managed to take out several of the Scythers, but for each one that fell, another took its place. Slowly the traders were cut down one by one until none remained. It's unfortunate for the traders that even though the caravan had no interest in attacking the ship, the mechs simply could not tell the difference. Almost immediately after the clash between the traders and mechs, a massive group of Scaria-ridden lizards have appeared from the northeast. They're just as aggressive as the mechs and extremely dangerous. For some reason, they seem to be heading directly toward the poison ship. Since the Scythers are programmed to destroy anything that strays too near, and the lizards are maddened to the point of attacking anything, the two groups seem intent on battling to the death. Only a handful of Scythers remained after the shelling and the battle with the traders. The lizards made short work of the survivors and moved towards the colony. At least the colonists would be safe behind their walls. Now the toxic fallout has passed and the lizards have moved on. It's just a matter of cleaning up this mess in the north and finishing off the ship. In the meantime, the colonists have set to work building new solar panels to help offset the power consumption from their new hydroponics room. A massive group of tribals have arrived, intent on razing the settlement to the ground. As the settlement has grown, so too has the anger and spiritual fervor of the tribal clans. The more they fail to stop the colony, the more convinced they become of the righteousness of their task. As the anger grows, so too does the number of willing tribal raiders. This attack marks the largest assault they've mustered to date. The defenders man the mortars and begin shelling a cluster. Unfortunately, the damage was mitigated by the ruins, and the number of tribals wounded in the barrage was minimal. The colonists would have to mount their primary defense at the walls. The tribals swarmed the southern gates and charged through. The defense took advantage of the tight corridors and choke points to even the numbers. In such tight quarters, the massive numbers of tribals meant little. The unarmored tribals made for soft targets for the colonial assault rifles. As the attackers were torn down, the fear grew until the raiders became overwhelmed. As several of them turned to run, the fear rippled out across the attack and spread until each and every warrior was running for their life. Unfortunately for the colonists, this would only serve to reinforce their belief and draw more warriors to the cause. Nearly a week has passed. In the late afternoon of the 15th of Jugas, a message came across the Count's Council. Carissa was the first to respond, and she alerted the others of a call for help of a traveler moving through the wastes, being chased by a group of aggressive mechanoids. The colonists agreed to offer him safe harbor, knowing all too well it would mean a fight for their lives. Not long after, the mechs arrived, but the colonists were prepared and waiting for them. The pack of machines was driven forward by a breach termite, equipped to tear down the walls of any fortress. Luckily for the colonists, they had just the thing to deal with it. Jet ran forward and activated her shock lance, wiping the memory core of the termite, rendering it completely inert. They allowed the remaining centipedes to blast through the wall, only to be surprised by several EMP grenades issuing forth from the rubble. The mechs were all stunned, and the defense force leapt to action. The defenders managed to destroy the remaining centipedes before their systems could reboot. Now it's just a matter of finding out why this traveler was being chased by machines in the first place. The colony has survived for nearly 4 years, established as a small outpost in the middle of a ruined city, only to grow into a thriving settlement that can sustain dozens of citizens. The objective was to establish a foothold in order to resettle the entire city, and now that objective has been achieved. The colonists are no longer colonists, they're now the first citizens of Common City, and for many of them, they would live out the rest of their lives in this place, having children and raising families that would call this place home. For now, the financiers of the project have been satisfied that the city is safe enough to begin Phase 2 of the reconstruction effort. The first wave of new settlers was set to arrive in the next few days. After that, wave after wave of settlers would arrive until the city was truly and fully rebuilt. It's unclear how long this project would last, or how exactly it would end, but for now, financiers have been satisfied and the colonists have survived. What happens next remains to be seen. This is the final episode of the Scarlands series. I hope you enjoyed the story. Make sure you check out my other series and subscribe to the channel for updates on new videos.